So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Franklin Jara.
Either one is fine. Thank you so much for having me.
So today we are going to be getting all kinds of legal advice from Franklin. He has, but first let me introduce myself. I am Paola Mendez and I am the founder of the Blogger Union. And the Blogger Union, for those of you who haven't heard of it before, is a network of blogger communities dedicated to growing our members' brands and incomes through meetups, workshops, and brand collaborations, and now webinars like this one. So we have blogger communities all over the US. I run the one in Miami called the South Florida Bloggers, but you'll also find the New York City Bloggers, the DC Bloggers, the Houston Bloggers, Minneapolis Bloggers, Orlando Bloggers, etc. So if you'd like to become an official member, I welcome you to check out thebloggerunion.com. And if you like to follow my personal blog, you can follow Coral Gables Love on Instagram. And let me introduce you to Franklin. Franklin today, he is a Florida attorney and he has experience working with influencers to review contracts. And he also has experience in family law and litigation. And I'm gonna let Franklin talk a little bit more about himself. Tell us about you.
Hi, Paola. Thank you so much for having me here to speak to your group. I know everybody's stuck at home right now, so this is a nice reprieve, a nice opportunity for people to connect and get involved. As you mentioned, I am a Florida attorney. All the advice that I will be given today will be limited to Florida. You can ask me any questions that you may have if you're outside the state of Florida, but I will answer them as best as I can, but my advice will be limited today to Florida. But yes, I have over 15 years experience. I do contract reviews, commercial litigation, I do family law and employment litigation. So I know probably this blog is mainly about your content creation and those rights, but today if you have any questions regarding, I know this situation with COVID going on, if you have questions regarding your employment or any family issues that I may have a questions, wills or of any nature, just ask me the question. I'll answer them the best if I can. And if I can't, I'll try to point you in the right direction. You can always text me or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and
Okay,
yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so let's get started. Now that you guys know Franklin's name by now, we can just look at our faces. Okay. Okay, so let's get started. So I have here a few questions that our members had asked about legal advice that we've had over the years at our regular meetups. So I'm going to start with those. But if you have any question, whether it's about like your landlord is asking you to pay rent and you can't pay rent and what do you do legally, or anything, if it's blog related or business related or anything, Franklin is a well-rounded attorney, so he'll try to give you the best advice on any of those topics. And so feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on the chat so we can include those as well. But let's get started. We recently have seen all the websites change to add a little pop-up window asking you if you accept their cookie policy on their website. Now, our members have been asking, is this something that we need to put on all of our blogs on our websites?
Well, it would be recommended to put on your blogs, especially if you're going to reach out beyond your jurisdiction, beyond Florida, beyond the United States. A lot of these concerns have to do with different jurisdictions have different privacy policy issues. So it really becomes one of these questions that what's the privacy policy in North Carolina, Washington, D.C., in Europe, or whatever the case may be. It's recommended if you're going to reach out to a wide community, which I'm assuming a lot of you are trying to reach out to, it's recommended that you have a privacy policy stating, you know, what information you protect, what's available, what's given to third parties, because I know a lot of times bloggers advertise and they have third parties who want to get lists and information. So it's important to protect yourself if you're going to reach out to a wide base.
Okay, great. Because the whole cookie pop-up window started when the privacy laws changed in Europe. But all of the websites here in the US also did it because they might have customers in Europe buying products.
Well, a lot of times the wonderful thing about the internet is that it reaches anywhere and everywhere. So basically you are available anywhere and everywhere, and your website would be visible anywhere and everywhere. The question is, what products are you selling, what services, what's being given out, what's the information. So depending on what information is being traded or provided, you're definitely going to have to provide privacy policy.
Okay, great. So if you don't have a privacy policy, now's a good time to start working on that. Okay. So let me look real quick. Someone
I see a
asked,
question here is, oh yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
You're the host, I'm sorry.
No worries. So Edward is asking if there's a good privacy policy template available or someplace we can find one that you recommend.
Well, here's the thing. It's tough for me to recommend. I don't know where Edward is. I would advise that
I think he's from Fort Lauderdale.
He's in Fort Lauderdale. Well, so.
Yes.
So if you like, what you can do is I put up my email there earlier. Whoever wants one, if they like, just email me and I'll send the privacy policy template, one that you can fill in. And I'll just provide that to you guys. So shoot me your email and I'll see what I can do for you guys.
Thank you, Franklin. That's
welcome.
A great resource. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now moving on to more the business of blogging and brand collaborations. So whenever there is a brand collaboration, there is some sort of contract, whether it's just a minimal email having the specifics laid out or like a 10-page contract with like all kinds of stuff in there. Can you tell us some things that we should look out for in any contract? I know it's
well, obviously that's a pretty broad question, but I can definitely give you some idea, especially given your example, a one-page email. There's certain things that you really want to look out for as opposed to a 10-page contract, which may have a bunch of hidden loopholes and other questions like that. But definitely one of the most important terms in any contract is to make sure that you're each getting what you bargained for. Am I expecting what I'm supposed to get, and am I providing what they're expecting they want to get? So it's important to understand the terms. So in this case, am I going to get paid? When am I going to get paid? How is that going to happen? Because I'm assuming that's what everyone here really cares about. So it's important to know, what are the terms? How do I meet those terms? Do we both understand the terms clearly that we're each going to provide? This is very important to see that. The other important issue to see is, what happens if one of us doesn't do what we're supposed to do? Because I think that's really what everybody is looking for here, because if everything goes great, there's no problem. Big thing in these contracts is, what happens in the event of a breach? Do I give up my rights? Do I lose money? How much money? So it's important to see what the terms are, what you're each getting, and what happens in the event things go south. How do you get out of this contract? How do you get out of this agreement? Are there penalties, attorney's fees, etc.? Aside from that, if anyone has questions, then obviously have an attorney review any complicated contract, especially if it's going to be 10 pages, because there's going to be a lot more to look at than just who's getting paid.
Right.
And then another important thing to see is, because I'm assuming a lot of you, from what I understand, deal with third parties that are outside the state of Florida and other corporations outside your jurisdiction. It's important to see that, where does any action take place if something goes south? So do you have to go to court in North Carolina, or do you have to go to court in Florida? These are things to look at, because if you have to go to court in North Carolina and you're in Florida, you could be at a major disadvantage. So these are the little things to look at.
Okay, that's great advice.
But obviously have an attorney look at your contract, because every case is different and everything can change at any time.
Right. But I love this, because even though we're going to go look for an attorney to go look over our contracts, at least we are a little bit more educated into, what we're looking out for. So I think, okay, we have a question from Nikki, and she says, I signed a non-disclosure agreement as a brand ambassador for a company. During the process, the organization did not fulfill their part of the part, I guess, of the agreement, but she did. And now, as an influencer, can she back out without legal issues? I'm gonna guess it depends what the contract says. But
it depends. That's the beauty about being an attorney. We just always say it depends, right? But let me see if I understand the question correctly. She signed an NDA promising not to disclose whatever it may be that she couldn't disclose during the process. The organization did not execute their part. I'm assuming they breached some sort of provision in the NDA. I can unmute. I mean, that's up to you, Paul. I don't know if.
I think this is a very specific case, and I think, Nikki, you might be better off just emailing Franklin and you guys taking it offline. But like in general.
But to answer in general, typically it's not easy to back out of a signed agreement if you both have signed it. There's usually methods to enforce the agreement. I don't know what the breach in this case may be, but depending on the breach, there's basis to terminate. Maybe you can't. Maybe this is a provision that can be breached, but the rest of the agreement survives. If she'd like, I'd be more than happy to talk to her after this. If she wants to give me a call or send me an email, I'd be happy to discuss her case further and see how we can help her. But definitely, it's not as easy once you sign a contract to just say, oh, well, you didn't do your part, I'm not going to do my part. That's not really a good advice. What I would suggest is take it to an attorney, have them explain your rights, see what can be done, because it's not just as easy as throwing your hands up and saying, I hope nothing happens. There may be repercussions, yes.
Okay, that's great advice. Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Now, moving on to who owns what.
I think there was another question from Jean.
Jean, choice of law arbitration clauses.
Was that a question or was that just
I think she's just saying those are good things to look out for because you mentioned.
Oh, right, where you're getting sued.
She's
right.
She's piggybacking.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry.
All right, no worries. Okay, so owning our work. So a question that we get a lot during our meetups is, when you hire a photographer to take pictures of you for the blog, who owns those photographs?
It depends on the relationship you establish with the photographer. Okay, there are occasions where you can hire a photographer, work for hire, where think of it as a 15th, a quinceañera, a wedding, where they take pictures, you pay them for the money, you own the pictures, you can post them on Facebook, you can post them on social media, you can advertise with them, they're your pictures, as your content. Now, if you're just hiring a photographer to use their images that they take for you, then they may own the content. So you really have to sit down and have an understanding with your photographer to see what the relationship is and who's going to maintain ownership of it. Usually, if they're going to sell their images, it's going to be a little bit more than just lending them to you or licensing them to you. So I would definitely suggest that you have a conversation with whoever you use as a photographer and either have a clear understanding verbally or, as always, put it down in writing so you understand who owns the photography. Now, it doesn't have to be a complicated agreement. It could be as simple as a receipt saying, we took these many pictures and I got paid cash or whatever the case may be, and now they're the owners. So it's, just make sure you have an understanding as to who's going to own the material. Okay,
that's great. So that's something to keep in mind because it's something that we don't necessarily do always, is have a little licensing agreement with your photographer or whatever, saying that you own the photos or that the photographer owns the photos or whichever it is that you're looking for. Okay. Now, continuing with photos and who owns them. What if a brand uses your photograph without your permission?
Well, you can usually what happens is you'll send the cease and desist letter and tell them that you have ownership of the picture or the material that you're asking them to stop using. They're probably going to come back and want to establish some sort of proof that you actually own the content or the material, whatever the case may be. But in the event that, to answer your question the way you asked it, they're literally using your photo, you have the right to sue them to have them stop and collect damages for whatever amount of money you've lost by their use of your property. Okay.
There you have it. Now, on the business side, if it's a brand that you want to work with and they took your photo, then it might not be the best advice to sue them for damages for the photo. But if they are being unresponsive and they kept using your photographs and all over their website and their advertising, then that's something to know, that you do own your photographs. Okay. Can you please explain the difference between copyright and trademarking?
A trademark basically relates to a brand. So Coca-Cola, they trademark Coca-Cola. Blogger Union, the trademark would be Blogger Union. A copyright typically deals with a work of art. Like, you know, if you write a book, you get a copyright on the book. You copyright a song, you copyright a work of art.
A photographer?
A logo. You can copyright, yeah, a photograph could be, you know, any image, any design, basically sound, music, art could be copyrighted.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. So Jean has a good question. So how do you copyright your stuff? All the blog posts that you write, your videos, your photography? How do you establish ownership of the content? I'm mixing John and Edward, Jean and
Edward. Basically, it's the common law states that it's first use. Whoever used it first, you basically created the copyright. But if you want to go further, you can always have it registered with the Patents and Trades Office.
Okay. Alrighty.
Patents and Trademarks Office.
Okay.
So if you want to look it up, it's the USPTO.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they only do trademarks, right? They don't do copyright?
I don't believe, I think they just do patents and trademarks. So I don't think they do copyrights. So copyrights would be a different situation.
Okay. Right. Alrighty. Let's see. Okay. Talking about collections.
Okay.
We've had several members who do a partnership with some business, and they do their work, they deliver, and then the business does not pay the invoice or whatever amount they agreed to. What do you recommend someone do in that case?
You know, that's obviously, I would recommend that they go collect the money that they're owed. That would be the answer that everybody wants to hear. Now, obviously, financially, that's a limitation for people depending on what's at stake. But what you can do is definitely you can send out demand letters demanding that they pay you. And ultimately, if they do not want to pay you, you have the right to take them to court and sue them for the money owed.
Okay. Now, here's something I would like to ask you, because I know that a lot of people, influencers, will threaten with an attorney. I was like, before actually calling an attorney. How do you feel about that? You know, they tell the brand, like, okay, you pay me or I'm going to have to get my attorney involved. Is that something that you recommend people do or not?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with telling someone that you're going to enforce your legal rights by hiring an attorney. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The only thing I would say is that, you know, don't make it an idle threat. You may have to follow through once you pull the attorney card. So it's nothing wrong with saying that. It's, I recommend my clients say that all the time initially. It's like, listen, if we don't get this resolved, I'm going to have to get my attorney involved. The question really is what happens after that, because at that point, the other party may say, okay, then talk to my attorney. And now you're going to either have to get an attorney or you're going to have to deal with that attorney on your own.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with it. Just beware of how you're going to follow through with it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So if someone still didn't pay and they were to call you because this person isn't paying me, what do you think would be the first step of how to handle that?
The first step would probably be to send a demand letter stating that money is owed and that you're giving them X amount of days to pay, or you're going to have to sue them. So typically the first step is to send like a letter notifying them that unless they resolve the breach, that they're going to be sued.
Okay.
And usually the demand letter comes from an attorney, because that's, you know, when you make
Right.
that threat.
That's, you have already crossed into
Right.
following through with that threat. And the same applies here at the demand letter stage, right? Because it's another threat. It was like,
Well, a lot of times sometimes what ends up happening, and I'm not going to say this happens every single time because it's not true, but a lot of times what could happen is once they get the letter from an attorney, then they see, oh, wait a minute, this may cost me more to defend than it would be to pay up, and maybe the demand letter would do it. A lot of times a cease and desist letter will do it. A lot of times these situations can be resolved with a demand letter. I'm not saying it works 100% of the time, but a lot of times this could be resolved with a simple letter. Yes.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about partnerships, because several of our members like to maybe start projects together, maybe start a YouTube channel together or a blog together or some type of business. So what do you recommend they do that in terms of structuring that partnership?
That's another in-depth question. What I would say about forming a partnership with anybody, whether it's your best friend, your family member, or two complete strangers, to have a very good understanding of the roles of the partners and what happens in the event of a winding down. What is the payment structure? What is the profit sharing structure? Have a real understanding sitting down, because a lot of times, and you know, business people get excited and they only see positive things, which is great. This is why they're successful. But sometimes things fall apart and then people rush into agreements and then they don't understand what their role is. What am I supposed to do? What was she supposed to do? I thought we were each getting 50-50. I didn't order this expense. So sitting down and having a good partnership agreement, someone to draft something where both parties, all the parties, doesn't have to be two, understand what their rights and responsibilities are to the corporation, to the partnership, is essential to having a successful partnership business of any kind.
Okay, awesome. Alrighty, so we have just a few minutes left, so I would like to switch a little bit into like legal issues with the going crisis that's going on. If you guys have any other questions regarding to blogging or content creation or anything like that, you can put in the chat, and if we have time, we'll switch over again.
You can always email me directly. I'm going to put up my email address again, just in case.
Okay, perfect. So, all right, so we've been seeing a lot of people starting to put together their wills with the current crisis. And I came to realize that there's such a thing as a will and a living will. Can you please explain the difference?
Okay, sure. It is a term that gets confused a lot. A lot of people misconstrue the terms one for the other. A will basically is a statement, a document of your desires of what's going to happen to your personal property, your content, your house, your china, the money in your bank accounts, your jewelry. A living will, on the other hand, is more of a living will is more of a directive to your medical doctors, medical facilities, and staff, saying, what do you want to see happen in the event of certain medical conditions happening? So do you want them to feed you artificially? Do you want them to provide oxygen, keep your heart going? So you can really get into a very deep understanding as to what levels of care and commitment do you want. So along those lines, there's another document called the Do-Not-Resuscitate that we hear a lot about. And that's usually the difference between that and a living will. That's basically what happens. You tell the medical facilities, final rights. What happens if my heart stops? What happens if I stop breathing? And basically what you're saying is authorizing them not to continue life rescuing measures and letting you pass away. So I don't know if you understood that or not, but
yes, that clarified it. Thank you so much. Okay, quick question. So what if you cannot afford to keep paying your rent or mortgage? What is going on with the current situation?
well, that's another tough one. Technically, you're still supposed to be paying your rent. There's nothing in the law that prevents you from not having to pay your landlord or meeting your mortgage obligations. What's happening here in Dade County and in other jurisdictions in the state of Florida is that there's a moratorium on eviction. So what does that mean? That means if you stop paying your rent today and you get evicted, the sheriff is not going to come out and remove you until the state of emergency passes in Dade County and Broward County. I know it has one also. So you'll be safe in your home for a while, but once the moratorium is lifted, everything's gonna roll back in real quick. So you may get removed fairly quickly once the emergency happens. But for the time being, I suggest that you contact your landlord. A lot of landlords are working with their tenants, see what they can do. Also contact your mortgage companies and see if you qualify for a forbearance. It's important to note, though, that the mortgage companies are only giving out forbearances. It's not a forgiveness of your mortgage payments. You will have to pay that completely at the end of the forbearance period. Now, there's different forbearance periods that different banks are applying, 3 months, 6 months, but whichever one you qualify for, at the end of the 6 months period, you will have to pay the entire amount in full. A lot of banks are, what I understand, if you're unable to pay after the forbearance period, then you would have to apply for a modification and go through that process through your banking institution. Okay. So there's no real easy answer.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you, Franklin. Okay. I think we have time for one more question. And Alana wants to talk about FTC regulations regarding disclosure of advertising with influencers. So she says, can you please discuss how a blogger should use the hashtag ad versus hosted versus sponsored?
I'm going to be honest with you at this moment. I'm not really sure the distinctions between hashtag ad and hosted and sponsored. These are things that have come up recently. And I know that there are requirements to differentiate between this being a paid advertisement. So I wish what I can do is I can have Alana email me directly, and I will do a little bit more research for her and give her a better answer. Unfortunately, at this time, I'm unable to. Okay.
Thank you, Franklin. Actually, the FTC released a guide for influencers. So I put the link in the chat and you can take a look-see. And it has different scenarios. So like if you're in a video, you have to say it at the beginning, and when people, and that's not enough because people can join you throughout the video and not and miss your first announcement. So you have to repeatedly throughout the video tell them that this is a sponsored video if you're doing it. But take a look at that link, and if you have any further questions, I'm sure you can email Franklin and he can clarify all the differences with the hashtags. I think we have just 1 minute left. So Franklin, if you can please put your email one last time in the box in case anybody missed it. You can grab Franklin's email from the chat. And thank you everyone so much for joining us.
And let me know if you guys need that privacy policy, and I'll be happy to zip one out to you guys.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Franklin. Thank you so much for taking the time to share.
Thank you for having me, Paula.
With us. All righty, thank you everybody, and we'll see you at the next one. We have our next webinar coming up this Thursday, and it's about how to incorporate your blog into a business so that you can file taxes as a business. You can work with brands as a business and not as a person. It looks a little more professional. So take a look at the South Florida Bloggers Instagram link in bio, and you'll see the link for the webinar. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. Have a wonderful week.